like a train, but I knew it wasn't, and it just hit. We were right underneath the front of it. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't want to again.
And I just said, Lord, if it's time for me to go, well, I have to say that it's my time to go.
Every 40 to 50 years, or about twice in a long lifetime, all the complex meteorological conditions come together for a long-lasting tornado outbreak on a single afternoon. The resulting weather event has been affectionately called a super outbreak. Now, some define a super outbreak as a severe weather event involving more than 50 tornadoes in a 24-hour period. Others argue that it should be 100 tornadoes, or 15 or more violent tornadoes, or 100 deaths. Definitions aside, there are 3 tornado outbreaks that are generally accepted as super outbreaks: March 21st, 1932, April 3rd, 1974, and April 27th, 2011. There are many similarities between these outbreaks synoptically. They all affected the Deep South and points north as opposed to the Great Plains. But where they all differ is timing. The state of society and scientific knowledge and the technology available played a critical role in the outcome of these 3 events. But one of these outbreaks stands out amongst the others, a widespread outbreak that one small brilliant man was quietly waiting to prove to the world that his tornado damage assessment scale was worthy of worldwide acceptance. In this edition of Beyond the Forecast, we will analyze the impressive forecast given by the National Severe Storms Forecast Center and how this super outbreak was the catalyst for the widespread adoption of the F-scale and damage assessment of tornadoes. The man who was quietly waiting for an event like this was Dr. Ted Fujita, once a Japanese student studying the damage from the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki, had now dedicated his life to studying the physical mechanics of tornadoes through the damage they cause. His ability to tell a tornado's life through chronologically hand-drawn sketches, damage path maps, and complex wind speed estimates. These methods were unmatched, but at the time they were quite frankly frowned upon by many of his contemporaries. But after every major tornado since the Fargo F5 in 1957, there he was with the students, carefully analyzing with the damage, which would be published in a detailed report. In 1971, Dr. Fujita finalized and published his proposed F-scale, a way to determine a tornado's fastest wind speed based on its damage path. In this paper, he applied his F-scale to 13 years worth of tornado and hurricane damage analysis. He had conducted a rating for each tornado between 0 and 5, with 0 being light damage and 5 being well-built catastrophic damage. In this paper, like the rest of his research, it was met with much criticism. Dr. Fujita needed a major tornado event that would get the national news in order to prove that his system was worthy of international adoption. And in April of 1974, he finally got his chance. A strong, low-pressure system was surging across the country that was pulling cold, dry air from Canada into warm, moist air from the Gulf. This is not only a classic setup for a widespread tornado thunderstorm outbreak, but quite possibly a blizzard on the northeastern side. And so, an unprecedented call to action was made. Alan Pearson, the head of the National Severe Storms Forecast Center, messaged 13 weather offices across the Midwest and Southeast, asking them to perform any maintenance on radar that day, April 2nd, because the following day, all radar stations were to operate at full capacity for the upcoming severe weather event. In the overnight hours, the low pressure continued to strengthen, and by the mid-afternoon, there was around 4,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE, which is a lot of energy for air to rise rapidly and become a thunderstorm. The low-level flow wrapped around the central low pressure, which enhanced the low-level wind field, creating a strong low-level jet to the west, which would bring up vast amounts of Gulf moisture for thunderstorms. A crashing cold front was located to the southwest, and a narrow band of dry air was situated between the cold front and the Gulf moisture. This dry air is called a dry line, which will be critical in initiating storms because as it pushes into a more moisture-rich environment, it lifts pockets of moisture into the atmosphere where they explode into individual thunderstorms, thus creating supercells. Anywhere along the I-65 corridor was primed for significant severe weather. And if you're familiar with the Storm Prediction Center's outlooks, there was a predecessor called the Severe Weather Outlook, and on April 3rd, the outlook called for scattered severe thunderstorms expected today. Now, scattered in 1974 roughly equates to a moderate risk for today's outlooks, so a pretty high-end risk. By 3 p.m., the cap started to break in the open warm sector, which is a temperature inversion a few miles in the atmosphere which inhibited storm development. Scattered thunderstorms started to develop and become quickly into supercells between Nashville and St. Louis. These storms were quickly becoming tornadic. 3:20 p.m., the storms on the most eastern part of the band produced 2 tornadoes. These supercells will continue to trek into central and northern Kentucky, with a powerful F5 tornado clipping the Louisville metro, and Brandenburg was directly hit with an F5. Brandenburg was getting hit. There were 3 other significant tornadoes on the ground, one from a supercell in DePauw, Illinois, and 2 more supercells in northern Illinois. Over the next 2 hours, supercells would develop over central Indiana and produce prolific tornadoes, 3 of them being rated F4. But the most prolific tornado of the super outbreak, which would be etched in tornado history, was about to happen in Xenia, Ohio. The tornado entered the northeastern portions of Xenia, and the tornado was headed towards Windsor Park neighborhood. This area of Xenia was poorly built, with structures being totally wiped off the face of the earth. And a remarkable video was filmed by Bruce Boyd, a 16-year-old. He grabbed his old film camera and walked out onto the sidewalk in front of his house and started to film the tornado tearing through Xenia. The inner vortices of the tornado were so clearly defined and visible with this tornado. It produced F5 damage. Houses simply imploded due to the strong winds and strong wind fields, and these smaller tornadoes inside the parent tornado were slamming into houses. As the tornado tore through the heart of town, it caused purely catastrophic damage in the town. As it exited town, it derailed a nearby train which was bound for Cincinnati. This train had 447 carts on it, and the tornado tore the train apart, derailing it and picking up 57 carts and throwing them like missiles into the landscape. As the afternoon went on, many more tornadoes tore through Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Dr. Fujita, a scientist at Chicago University, was monitoring what was going down in these areas and decided that it was his chance to get out and survey the tornado damage and to get his scale to worldwide adoption. Fujita and his students left for Louisville, where he went around for days and weeks, tirelessly taking photographs of the damage that was done. But Fujita had to survey the damage quickly due to the human nature and urge to clean up from the devastation right after the tornadoes. As the months went on, and with the aid of his students and colleagues, Fujita compiled each individual tornado onto a large map and created damage indicators for each type of damage. Fujita would compile each photo and their video footage for their tornado respectively and order it in chronologically order to get a full picture of the tornado from its formation to dissipation. Xenia, Ohio quickly garnered the spotlight for the worst of the damage. Fujita actually at one point rated the tornado F6 and designated Xenia to be the only F6 tornado. But after revision, Fujita argued that F6 damage would be inconceivable destruction. Fujita dropped the F6 rating and rated it F5. Xenia, Ohio is the only tornado in history to have an F6 rating for some time. The National Weather Service, after this super outbreak, started to finally implement Fujita's F scale. After countless years and decades of work, Dr. Tetsuya Fujita finally got his F scale on the national scene with the biggest weather agency in the world for adopting its use. This outbreak single-handedly changed the way weather forecasting and how we assess damage from tornadoes happens today. Thank you all for tuning in to Beyond the Forecast. I'm Ryan Auten, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.
sounded like a train, but I knew it wasn't. And it just hit. We were right underneath the front of it. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't want to again.
And I just said, Lord, if it's time for me to go, well, I have to say that it's my time to go.